used a magnifier. We'll call the meeting to order. And can we do a roll call, Vicki? Sorry. Let's start with the pledge. All right. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Report on the posting of the agenda.
The agenda was posted at City Hall, the city's website, and at the Leisure Center last Thursday by 5 p.m. as required by policies and procedures.
And popping back up to roll call.
I knew we'd get caught up. Commissioner Armstrong?
Here.
Commissioner Boley?
Here.
Commissioner Craig is absent. Commissioner Davis?
Here.
Commissioner Diaz?
Here.
Commissioner Goodman?
Here.
Vice Chair Navarro is absent. Commissioner Pace, I'm sorry.
Here.
Commissioner Pace. And Chair Young.
Here. Thank you. Regarding the minutes, has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes and weigh in? Are there any changes, or do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes as they are.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstained?
Okay.
Carol?
Yep.
And any opposed?
Okay.
Vicki, is there any correspondence?
We have none for today.
Great. It's time for public comment. At this time, it's been set aside for members of the public to address Parks and Recreation and the Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter and jurisdiction of the Commission. Although the Commission values your comments pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot act or have discussion on any of the items listed and posted on the agenda. Not posted on the agenda. So 3 minutes are assigned to each speaker, and if you want to come forward, anybody who would like to speak, and sit at this chair right here. And I'm going to ask you to push the button to put the green light on when you speak. Thank you. Yes.
I am Gary Hunter, a resident of this fine city. Can I begin? Good afternoon, and thank you for taking my time and your time in the discussion of the fate of the 2 tennis courts over at Demuth Park. Recently, NBC News reported that pickleball is the fastest growing sport in our country. According to the USA Pickleball Association, the sport continues to grow at about 12% last year, with membership in its association topping 300,000. If you haven't already done so, I would encourage you to go over to Demuth Park any morning between 8 and say 10 o'clock, and you'll see all 8 courts being used and another 8 to 15 people signed up on a board waiting outside the courts to play. The sport is competitive, yet it keeps a wonderful social, fun aspect to it as people rotate around and play with many different players in the course of a morning. Today, on this chilly day, when I got there at about 8:30, there were already 45 people there, some playing, some waiting to play, and over on the 2 tennis courts, there was nobody the entire morning. To me, if you want to support the greatest need of these courts, it would be to convert them to 8 more pickleball courts. With 16 total courts, we could host larger tournaments and round robins. There could be lessons for newcomers. We could even segment the 4 clusters that each would contain 4 pickleball courts to levels of play. So we could have one cluster being, in our ranking, a 4.0 or higher, which would be the advanced players, and a 3.5, which would be the intermediate, and then on to the less the beginner and then the maybe advanced beginner. And then they could move up to the different sections if they wanted to, if they improved. This is still a sport for the 50-plus-year-old who doesn't still have the ability to run around a tennis court if they were a tennis player, but loves the similar skill and competition of pickleball. It is also for those who want to have a fun social outlet. It is for men and women of all ages to come together, men and women of all races and beliefs and political affiliations that share this common, fun, wonderful interest. The friends I've made and continue to make just doesn't seem to stop at these courts. I'm also on the Palm Springs pickleball team, the over 50 team that competes against 3 other teams in our valley, and we are closing in on clinching a title for our city. The talent pool here in Palm Springs.
Thank you for your comments. Time's up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another speaker?
Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, my name's Dave Paquette. I'm the president of the Palm Springs Pickleball Club. As Gary was saying, we have a league now that we're playing over there. We've got a women's team and a men's team. We're renting the courts for tournaments on a regular basis now, as Vicki could probably attend to, because we do the paperwork with her every time that we rent the courts. So the courts are starting to generate a little bit of revenue. Right now, what we're having to do is rent the whole facility and go in and tape temporary courts with painter's tape, and then we peel that tape up when we're done on the 4 courts that are tennis courts. So it's kind of a grueling ordeal. I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning to get there early and get those done so that we can start our play at 7:30 when we do a tournament. So it would be great to have those courts converted over and have pickleball at Demuth Park exclusively. The Valley is getting very famous for pickleball. Just recently, the USAPA, which is the governing body for United States Pickleball, just signed a 5-year contract with the Indian Wells Tennis Gardens to bring our national championship to the Coachella Valley, which is going to generate millions of dollars of revenue for the Valley here over the next 5 years. So we have 3 big tournaments a year, as tennis does, and they're going to generate quite a bit of income for the Coachella Valley. So this sport is really taking off. National television, CBS, has had us on their network now 3 times, and they will have a crew here in November of this year for the national championships. So this sport is really taking off, and we're getting a lot of younger people coming into the sport who used to play tennis that maybe are not ranked heavily in tennis anymore. We have a pro division now where they play for money, so they're coming over and actually earning a living playing pickleball. So this is not only a United States sport, it's an international sport that's going all across the world, and we hope someday to have it into the Olympics, but that's down the road. But for me, it gets me off the couch, it gets me out there, gets exercise. Socially, I get to meet new people all the time. It's just a fantastic sport that's a very social experience as well as a great sport. So anything you could do to expedite getting some more courts for us, either build them or convert them, would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Are there any other speakers? Public comment is closed. As no city manager is here, I would assume there are no city manager comments, or has David given you anything?
He is not, and I thought that he was probably going to be here, but could have gotten tied up with the other meetings.
We'll hold that in the event he comes in. We can have him drop in. We wanted to do an update on a couple of the ad hoc committees, but today's meeting, we're going to spend most of the time going over the fees, as we are on a trajectory to get that done and get it to council hopefully during the month of March, but we'd like to get through as much of that as we can today. So if we can have an update on the dog park, let's go ahead and start with that.
And Stacy, I don't know if we had a brief meeting the other day to talk, because there's some things going on that facilities and maintenance have been working on. So we sat down and met with Stacy and Ellen to discuss temporary off-leash dog areas and just dog parks in general. So we're going to do a little update on that.
Great.
Well, basically, the first thing that I want to point out is I'm sure you've gotten the feedback that we have. the condition of the dog park right now, especially on the small side. That grass is already starting to brown up a little bit. We have a pretty long run in the middle of the large dog park that we're trying to section off today, actually. It's the low spot, and it tends to gather a lot of the irrigation, and it's also a really good natural dog run, back and forth, back and forth. So we're working on maintenance for that. Long and short is, as time's gone on, we're trying to find other avenues so that when we actually have to shut down both the small and large dog parks for overseeding and for maintenance, such as we're about to have to do because of the need to fertilize again. One of the options we've looked at are temporary relocations, and we've been working on actually cleaning up an area in Demuth that was being used inappropriately. And as we got into this, it looked like a really good opportunity that it might be a good overflow for when we have to shut down the large dog park. It's basically between fields 7 and 8. It does not have amenities. It doesn't have shade. It's not got grass. It's not pretty. It's not irrigated. It does have a water source, and now it has a fence. So we're hoping that when we start doing we're looking probably to have the maintenance for the grass over here at least 3 times a year. Initially, we would really love to just do the overseeding once a year in the fall, and then again a little maintenance in the spring. But the use is really heavy, and obviously, every time we drive by this, there's a lot of people there, which is great. But we're hoping that during this time we can minimize the impact that we're going to have on folks.
Question for you, Stacy. Is there, we just had the park redesigned here. So are we out of, length of time relative to the contract to come back and say, you built the park and it's great, except it has a swill in it that fills up with water? That wasn't part of the design. Are we able to go back and maybe recoup on any of that? Because it's never going to get better. It's going to gather water regularly. So
that low spot, yes, it has come back and reoccurred. It was actually when the contractor finished and he laid the new sod, all of that was tamped down. It was even, the base, everything was appropriate. It's twofold. One, we have trees. It's just a natural slope there to begin with, and then of course the increased traffic has made it exaggerated the situation. It's not necessarily the contractor as much as the way we use it.
Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Armstrong.
So I have some questions about, I understand the space you're talking about, but it's not going to be fenced off for small dogs. So that space, if we're going to close the dog park 3 times a year, is basically unusable for small dogs. And if you go to the small dog area at our dog park, it's probably the most heavily used space, I would argue, in the city parkland, if you look at usage and square footage. So, and it also has a higher degree of elderly people who take their dog there who can't exercise their dog. So if we're talking about, because of the grass, closing this 3 times a year, we're talking about closing small dog options for people in the city for a long period of time. So is it possible to fence that area so we have a small dog area? My other question was, or comment, is there something we could do with the maintenance of the dog park right now with power washing underneath the benches, because they're just they get really dirty and smelly, and people are having to take little bowls and try to wash it, and it doesn't seem that the maintenance people are taking care of that. And actually, the third thing I brought up at the last meeting, that large sign that was put on the dog park about fence about no digging, that is a piece of art. The city paid $100,000 for. We've over the years asked the city to remove the signage. Now we have this huge sign up. It's still up. I don't know why it's up there on the art. Hopefully the Public Arts Commission will also look at that as well, because it's just really doesn't look good.
Okay, starting with number 1, the small dog park, when we close that, we work with the animal shelter for the fence that's across the street from them in Demuth. That's what we've always anticipated having small dogs for when we're doing the maintenance. What we've done historically is rent additional fencing and kind of wrap around that for the large dogs. That's really expensive, and it doesn't satisfy the needs, more or less. There's just not enough space for the large dogs. I was hoping, going forward, that we could continue to utilize that. We did have a request from the Friends of the Animal Shelter to have that removed for an event that they have coming up. But as that is actually sunk in, and we would have to rip up the sod and area around that, and that was one of the points that I was seeking advice from this body on how to proceed with that, because potentially that eliminates the overflow for the small dog park. As for potentially adding additional sections inside the 7-8 fields, that's a possibility. I don't have a budget to do anything beyond what I've done. This was basically a maintenance and repair issue for us. Going forward, that's something that this body could make recommendations on or suggestions. I also have Mrs. Barron here. Come on up. She's the money lady.
Can you please introduce yourself so that we have it for the record? Thanks.
Hi, I'm Harriet Barron, and I'm the city's Director of Resource Development. Translated, that means I was hired to create and seek out alternative sources of revenue for the city. Sometimes that includes the public, and most especially people who enjoy using the dog park. No, but I just wanted to let you know why I was here, and I'm here to answer your questions and chat about anything you want to chat about.
Yes.
Okay, so super good points and questions, and Harriet, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
And I think something that you bring forward for consideration is we had a off-site ad hoc meeting for the retreat yesterday, and we spent a lot of time talking about what the Friends of model looks like and what is possible as a brand for Friends of Parks and Rec, and how it might be an umbrella and possible subcategories so that we could go into the community and look for additional resources. So I think we're all on the same page. I wanted to just actually say something about the temporary space. And Stacy, I'm going to just hats off. I mean, for just, having an urgent situation that needed attention and looking at places in the city and being able to solve some problems. So removing potential dumping areas, and I've been there multiple times by Field 7, and using a space and figuring out some, how within your budget you're able to make certain things work. So we did have a meeting, and we actually talked about what it would look like to create a more sustainable plan for that space, especially if the City Hall dog park needs to be closed 3 times a year. And because of what one might think of as a snag-foo, that the Friends of the Animal Shelter wants to remove their space, which was the ideal overflow, and the cost and the expense, what could we provide our small dog park patrons? And so there's an area in Demuth that is a former playground area that's a sand area that really could be ideal for the small park overflow, which could also be used for future animal shelter. So it's very close proximity, and once the tents are down for their event, it would go back to a natural, kind of organic park experience. So, Travis, you brought up some good things, and we've kind of addressed those. The real question is our recommendation, like what would Parks and Rec's recommendation be back to Marcus, back to city managers, so that Stacy has some support in moving this idea forward. And I'm not saying necessarily come out of M&O budget, but look at things at the city that we could repurpose and reuse to populate those dog areas that already might be existing so that there's not really an additional expense. The fencing for the animal shelter, we'll let the Friends of the Animal Shelter deal with that. But I think moving forward, we could create a temporary, inexpensive solution. And it's a shame that there is so much wear and tear. I do think that the second alternative is aligned with the proposal that we made to Measure J about creating a more rural and rugged dog experience in a natural setting that didn't have the expense attached to it and had the natural boundaries that the dog control folks had come and suggested to us. And so I just wanted to put that on record, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And Travis, I think that that's all been addressed. We also talked about the signage, which was in our last month's meeting, and the digging sign. And in the meeting that we had for the ad hoc committee for the retreat, there's ample time and opportunity to really dig deep into conversations around what would campaigns look like, what would blending community, public, and private funds look like. And so there would be lots of opportunity. On March 17th, we're meeting, Harriet. We can send you an invitation. It's just strictly brainstorming. We think ideas will come out of that and recommendations can be made. But thank you.
Actually, and we wanted to extend that invitation to you as well, since there's part of it, and we realize it's a Saturday, and we apologize for that, but it's when our retreat has been selected, so.
That's when all of us have the most time to devote to an endeavor like this.
Absolutely. Now, Stacy, one question I have for you is, I'm not sure that we've responded to you yet relative to if the Friends of the Animal Shelter are asking that be removed. Are they paying for that removal and replace and space prep?
No, that's not direction that we, they came to the SEPT meeting, and they're proposing a fundraiser event at a much larger scale than they've done before, which is great. And they're basically looking at putting 2 40-by-80 tents, which would be right in that same area. My honest opinion, I discussed this with the assistant city manager. He wanted me to come back to this group as a whole before I even go back to meet with them again to see if you have an appetite for us ripping that out. If we rip this out, this of course has concrete, it's sunk, we're gonna have to do sod, et cetera. If we rip this out, would we replace this? As we're looking at new dog parks, what would we be doing going forward?
I think we'd have to leave that to the ad hoc committee and
I'm on a time frame, by the way.
You're on a time frame, and have we looked at Demuth Park to see if those 2 tents for one day can be placed elsewhere in a logical place? Because there are some reasonably flat places. They're not going to be necessarily hands reach to the animal shelter, but there are other places within the park which I think would be logical.
And again, it was first blush that they came with their plans, and there's several layers of approval they're going through. The main reason they have 2 a year, the main reason they tend to do them right there is because they provide tours of the shelter during the events. But that's not to say they wouldn't be willing to reconsider or relocate, but I wanted to start here before I went back to them.
Commissioner Pace.
So it sounds like the fencing is actually put in by concrete structures so that it is sunk.
And it doesn't have top rails. This was donated as it was built as a temporary Band-Aid during the construction of the animal shelter. That's why there's not top rails or appropriate gates, and it was really only supposed to be there for a small amount of time. It's now been 8 years.
But we do use it for other functions, such as when the dog park goes down, they get to use it, I understand, for free the rest of the year, and it's on city property.
Yes.
So would they like us to remove the tennis courts as well so they can fit another 40-foot one? It sounds like that would be an option.
Commissioner Boley?
After the use of it, the tents are down, then they're wanting us to put it back up so they can use it for their meet and greets of their dogs?
Commissioner Armstrong.
I'm confused. Are we talking about the fencing that is in Demuth Park that was put up with Measure J?
No,
money
no,
or
no, it's,
some
it's,
other-
it's a temporary park that we put up when we originally did the overseeding into the park. We put the temporary site at Demuth Communities, at the Demuth Park. The last time that we had put it up, and prior to coming down, the animal shelter had asked if we could leave it there in place until they could build their facility at the back of their site.
Right.
That was never done. The fence has been left there for them to continue to use that site for a meet and greet. And apparently, the fencing belongs to G&M Construction. Apparently, they donated it to the animal shelter. So the property is the city, but the fencing belongs to the animal shelter.
Okay, but that initially was put up with Measure J funding.
No, it was not. We rented that fencing from G&M Construction, and it came out of my budget for that.
But there was water put in, and that did also.
That was
come-
all part of
Okay,
budget stuff that I
I'd like to
did.
check on that, because
Yeah.
that's not completely my memory. But that was put up as a temporary dog park, and then it was taken over with some controversy by the animal shelter. So now, are you saying the animal shelter wants to take down this fencing, and, could be used permanently as a alternative for some event on park land?
No, it's temporary. They are having a big fundraiser.
I understand
Okay.
the temporary,
So
but-
the
but-
tents need to fit into that area, and or for their tents to fit in that area, the fencing has to come down. So
Okay, well,
at a
they should find
special
it.
event meeting, they
Yeah.
asked Stacy's crew to take the fencing down. Now, the question is, once that fencing comes down, we don't know what the condition of it's going to be, and what's it gonna cost to put it back up? And
And-
who's going to pay for that?
And what the field, the area would
All
look
right,
like.
well, that's just all kind of amazing to me. But, it goes back to my initial question. I'm still very confused about what's going to happen to the small dogs. We can't mix them. The small dogs will die, be killed. Hopefully, the animal shelter folks will understand that, once we adopt the dogs, and I've adopted my dogs from there, that we need places for them to go to. So, I just think that that's kind of an amazing thing. But I do want to go back, since we have the grant manager here. The idea, the dog park community is organized differently than other communities, swim communities, pickleball associations. It's a loosely organized kind of grassroots group. So several years ago, we tried fundraising for the new sod, and we were, not that successful, but the city did set up a method on the website to do it. But the idea that we're going to look at the dog park community to fundraise, I think, needs to be examined. And if we're going to do that, we need to look at all communities that use the parks, not just single out the dog park community. And if you go to the dog park, which I suggest you do, you're going to see, particularly on the small dog side, the community there is not maybe often a community that's engaged the way other people are, or their organizations are, so it really may not be a good candidate. I don't think it's a cure-all if you're looking for tons of money from the dog park community, because there's not like a dog park association, like there's a pickleball association, things like that.
Commissioner Boley.
Do we have any type of estimate about what we're talking about, Vicki, or
For,
taking it down, putting it back, or what they're
I'm,
requesting?
right now, I know I'd have to bring the front loader from the streets department, probably get 2 or 3 different staff. It's probably gonna be overtime, at least a day, probably 2, then depending on the condition of the turf after the fact. Their event is, April 8th, I believe, so we're running a little short on time. The initial thought, for me, was actually we were looking to utilize that in the next few weeks for fertilizer over here, not big giant shutdowns overseeding, just a few weeks to give it a little break and fertilize. So I might have to escalate that timeline if we end up taking this down.
Commissioner Pace.
So apparently the fence was donated to Palm Springs Animal Shelter, even though we originally paid to rent it. Did that include installation? Did it include putting the footings in? Was there anything else that was paid for by the city side of that?
The city, when we rented it, paid for the installation, the water hookup, everything it needed to be, and actually it was much larger than what it is right now, because it had a small side and a large side. So when we rented the fencing from G&M Construction, And it was only for a period of time, because again, it was supposed to be taken down as soon as the dog park opened. And when the dog park was opening, that's when the animal shelter asked the city to please leave it up for another couple weeks or month so we can build our facility in the back, so we have a meet and greet on property. And that never happened. So that fencing just stayed there. And GNM never requested it back, or we didn't offer it to them. And then I guess in the meantime, the animal shelter had conversations with GNM Construction, George Morantz, and he gave them the fencing.
But it's technically just the galvanized material, the chain link, the posts,
Post,
that.
right.
Everything else we provided.
Yes. Well, the only thing else that's there is just the water hook up in the fence. I mean, they provided everything, the fencing, the post, everything was provided by GNM.
But we paid to have it installed.
We paid to have it installed.
Okay.
Commissioner Diaz?
And so one of my questions is, are they not held accountable for anything over there, the shelter? They're not held accountable for any of the maintenance or anything that's gone on over there?
I would say, other than making sure that, dog debris is picked up, basically everything else is the city's responsibility to maintain the grass, empty the trash, so.
We own the shelter.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the maintenance, so the facility, all of those costs are included within our
Okay.
normal budget.
And the other question I have is, I have dogs. I don't take them to the dog park because I have a yard and I take them where I'm at. But I'm wondering, I don't know how feasible that is, or if as someone who goes frequently to the dog park, but would it be worth an investment in the artificial turf to put into the dog park, or is that nasty to do? I don't know our dog park aficionados, but I'm thinking that would be a whole bunch. Then you don't have water, and you don't have torn up grass, and you don't have reseeding, and you don't have et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Just to help you with that, Jody, City Council actually looked at that and the redo of the park, and the cost was phenomenally higher, and decided to go with the more reasonable cost, which
Even though
causes-
we repeat this cycle multiple times?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
If I also may add to that, Jody, in addition, whatever, it could have been economics, the community did not want artificial turf. The community did not want it. They didn't want the pressed sand and gravel. They didn't want
That's why I was looking
artificial.
at
They
Travis over
wanted
there
grass.
to see what he was going to say about it. It was just a suggestion.
And I have
was
to
just
say,
thinking.
and I was on that task force. The biggest nightmare is now, of course, come to fruition. It will constantly experience the wear and tear. There will always be problems. It will be more expensive than if they put the artificial turf in and then reduce their maintenance costs and expenses. And actually, the ability to cool artificial turf by hosing would be less expensive than closing 3 times a year, reseeding, and having to counter all these problems. But and Mayor Moon actually even brought a sample of turf to the meetings. So it really was dictated by the community. That was my experience.
I wonder if a commissioner might have a motion that they'd like to make to move this forward. Yes.
Okay. So I can make a recommendation or a motion, and we'll hear what you have to say. So I would make a motion that Stacy M&O goes back and looks at other areas in Dumurth to see if there might be an appropriate space that wouldn't require the removal of the small dog park. That would be my first suggestion and motion.
Can we have a second on that? And a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, that would be the first.
And I understand there's a timeline involved, and you might not be able to wait 4 more weeks for another meeting to be able to bring that back. And so I would say on a second motion that if you're able to also get an estimate for removal and repair, and then an estimate, because we're going to need a small dog park, for the old playground area and establishing that as a small dog park. And those would be 2 estimates I would request. I think we can probably, that would be my motion.
And a second? Commissioner Armstrong? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstain? Taken care of.
And then I would think, Vicki, you're able to email to the group the information so that we don't have to wait an entire month?
Right, so as soon as I have it, I can email that to you, so you have it.
And I'll also include in the email to Vicki, regardless of whether we do or do not take that fence down, I really would like to have consideration to potentially close for at least 2, maybe 3 weeks, both dog parks with the temporary setup that we have right now in Demuth as soon as we get the water fountain installed. And then same thing, we'll coordinate with the animal shelter to have the small dog park available for small.
Yes, Commissioner.
I'm just curious, we talked about there might be some benches and something around. Do you think you might be able to add in the more rural area, the larger area, 2 or 3, or so, whatever benches you have, just so there's some sitting area?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And my only comment would be, could we make sure that there's advance notice to the dog park now so that there's some signage, not on the fence,
And the message.
but signage someplace out so that they know that on a future date X, the park will be moving. Commissioner Diaz?
And is that area that you're discussing easily accessible? Commissioner Armstrong mentioned that there's a lot of elderly folks with their animals. Will they be able to get to that area?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's next to a parking lot.
okay, I'm just making sure.
And I guess the last thing, I'm not sure that we really have an answer on what Commissioner Armstrong asked for earlier about the signage on the no digging.
I'll take care of that.
Can we add that?
The reason that is up is we've had some dogs digging left unattended and some falls and injuries. That's not, it doesn't need to be on that fence, but we will get a post and have it appropriately placed.
Thank you.
Similarly, I will follow back around. We do power wash twice a week. I'm not aware of any reason why we wouldn't be doing under the benches, but I'll double check on that.
Thank you, and thank you for all the support. I know people come to you and complain a great deal, so we really appreciate all the work that you and your staff are doing for us. So thank you very much.
And I appreciate you guys jumping on this so fast. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the pickleball, and again, this is just a brief update from the ad hoc committee. Obviously, there will be greater discussion during our retreat, but I wondered if there was any update from the group. Nothing at this time? Okay. We should be prepared to work on it at the retreat. There's time set aside for that, so perfect. Real quickly, the update on the commissioner's participation in the Black History Parade. I believe Commissioner Davis has made arrangements for a Jeep.
Yeah, I contacted Crystal Chrysler, and they were willing to donate a Jeep for the morning. And I guess there's 2 other cars going to be involved, so the Jeep, I think, can hold at least 4 people, so.
Great, and Commissioner, why am I having a hard time? Goodman is going to drive her car, which will have a
be alone.
a second seat.
Somebody's got to sit with.
So if somebody can sit with Commissioner Goodman, and I have a Thunderbird convertible that comes with a driver, so I will sit in the seat there. So we have 4, 5, and I'm the 6th, so we are covered. I'm sure, Jody, you're not going to be able to be with us because you're working. Okay.
Staging and all that.
We'll wave.
Great.
Yeah.
And I've gotten you the information on the T-Bird, and do you have what you need from Commissioner Diaz? The one other thing that we're going to need to understand is where do we need to be at 10 a.m.?
The check-in is on Palm Canyon near Baristo, kind of in front of the building next to the Village Pub. It used to be a bank. I don't know what it's.
Baristo and Palm Canyon.
Yep.
And do we get any signage or anything that'll let us through to get into line,
Just-
or tell them?
Just pull in there, you come up to me and check in, and I'll tell you your number and tell you where to go to stage.
Okay,
You just have to have that information that you gave me already.
okay, great.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Commissioner Goodman?
And so once you get a head count, if we have a Jeep that carries 4 and then there's 5, once you get a head count, if we only need 5, if only 5 people are participating, then we only need 2 cars, right? So this is Saturday. So somewhere between now and Friday, we should have a head count and know exactly, because
So
there's
who's
only 8 of
coming?
us, 9 of us.
Who's going to be going in?
I know.
You are.
Commissioner Miguel is going to be there.
1, 2, 3,
Are you going?
I'm going to try to,
Four.
but I'm tied up, with modernism.
Right,
5. 1, 2, 3.
right.
So if he does or doesn't come, then you could get in that car.
Correct, and so, and you have a driver and you have all that information that you need for the Jeep?
Yeah. we'll
Okay,
get that too.
so, Chairman, I'm just going to ask you that by Friday, you make that decision and call and let us know, and of course, I'll have that for you if you need the extra car, but if we can all squeeze in the Jeep instead of having 3 cars, I think that'd be good.
Perfect.
I got one thing. Jody, I
Commissioner
was
Davis.
thinking, is it necessary for all the commissioners to be there at 10? Because I'm thinking the ones that are
Just
checking in the vehicles.
the car
yeah.
and the, whoever's going to drive and check in the cars and park it, and then,
Everybody
We don't
else
start,
be
the
there
parade
by
doesn't kick
10:30.
off till 11, so if you were there
10:30.
10:30 just to get downtown in that area, that would be fine.
Yeah.
But at 10:30, we have to check in with the car, and I can drive the Jeep if you want.
Okay. All right. My daughter was willing to drive for us, but whatever it
If it means all the commissioners in
can
one
fit.
vehicle.
Yeah, that's fine.
And is there any idea where within the parade our group would be? I'm just wondering, because I know one of the commissioners.
big. We'll get you.
Okay, we're covered.
Signage?
Is Jasmine
yes,
working on
and
the
we do
lineup,
have
or is
signage
Jarvis, is your staff? You're,
We have a meeting tomorrow night.
okay.
I can let you know once I see where we are right now.
Perfect.
I can give you an email.
If it's communication to everybody, it should come through Vicky.
Oh, I'll
so
send it
just
to
send
Vicky,
and then she
and
send it
Vicky
out.
can send
Perfect.
it to you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you working on this.
No problem.
And thank you all for working in your schedules if you can. It will be something that I hope we do going forward with every opportunity to be in front of our constituents. The next item on the schedule is the recreation program fees, and the ad hoc committee that worked on it was Commissioner Trent, Commissioner Armstrong, and myself, and Pace. And he has some of the, he's going to take the lead on this. All of this covers both items, Vicky, or is this just the rental side?
That is just the rental side. That
Okay.
was what
So
Dr. Reddy directed staff to do.
let's pull the document from Commissioner Pace, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
So I wanted to check to see if everybody got the second page that went out this afternoon, which was the notes on the fee draft. That was actually printed text, not the spreadsheet. Yes. Yes. Okay. So that was actually the information I wanted y'all to know next week so that you could kind of make a little sense of the spreadsheet, or last week. What we came at this approach differently to try and be able to provide these services to the city, across the city, and treating everyone fairly, not just by community with being able to offer certain things at certain locations, but creating a system that was equal, literally. So that if somebody who was at James O'Jesse and lived in that neighborhood but wanted to attend a program at Demuth, they would get the same kind of availability and use that they would have at their own center, but it would be at a completely different center. We had a couple of recommendations to approach that, and the first one was a kind of citywide membership program. Each of the community centers currently has their own separate annual membership that people pay for, whether it's for an individual, a family, or a child. What this does is it would create a single membership that would then be able to be taken anywhere. It covers the annual fees for the programs that are just hosted at Sunrise. It's their annual fee to go to Demuth. It's also their annual fee to go to James O'Jesse. It literally covers the board so that it's one program covered by everything, centralized, and with the application into that program, when they apply for their card, if they would like to apply for discounting on some of these programs that are costly for their children or anything else, they can apply for income assistance at that time. It would actually create a system that is based off the federal poverty income level that allows for even the most expensive program in the city to be accessed by somebody who's in a not so great situation. or that has multiple kids, that has a need for these services but can't generally reach them even if we just created a flat fee. Since it's done at the time they do their membership, all of that is done once a year, and it's done. It's clear. They're clarified for the next year of this is how they would do it. So that was our first approach. Get those memberships all into one kind of system that the base rate is a little bit more, but if you're a family in need, you're going to qualify for something that's even a little cheaper than what you would be paying now for access to all these programs. So, approach one. Approach two was, at that time when you're doing those things, you also then clarify what are residents, what are non-residents. And so if you have differentiated fees for different programs, whether it's a resident or a non-resident, well, now we know who is a resident. They're already qualified, they've got their card. A non-resident can utilize our services as well. They pay slightly more for their card, but at the same time, they will also pay slightly more for the program. With the city manager's focus being for this ad hoc group to be on the programs, we looked at what non-residents should be paying versus what our residents should be subsidized. So, in this spreadsheet is kind of the fees for what we currently charge is on the left, about when it's charged, whether it's annually, weekly, monthly, depending on the program, and then what a base rate would be for the cost recovery of each of those programs, based off of attendance. Obviously, if you have 30 people attending one program, you're not going to change that cost that much. So you can get it for a little cheaper. The, any objections so far with you two? Make sure I'm still on the same, good, okay.
You're exactly where we were.
For the base rate, that would also be what non-residents pay. Because, you know, they're not our resident, they're not subsidizing the city income any, this is, they pay the base, which is literally the cost of the program divided by annually how many people attend it. There would be then a 20% discount to residents, which is your resident level E. Sorry, it's kind of backwards lettering. Resident level E, it's 20% discount off the base rate. This is for anybody with no income assistance, nothing, that's what they would pay for that program. Each of these then is broken down into 4 more categories. Those 4 categories are based off of levels within the federal poverty income, whether it's 20% of it, 40%, 60%, 80%. So depending on where they fall for income, they can, you know, a typical program, which is $165, they could pay for their child to attend for $31. It would treat the city fairly across the board, no matter where you live, what neighborhood, where you're trying to put your children into programs, because you can't always do stuff that's close to home. Sometimes you have to do it close to work. And this would allow them to get that kind of discounting anywhere that they need to go for their children to be provided for. So that's major point number 2. Major point number 3, there are some of the programs that we ran across, one specifically, that when you apply this method to it, this program is very expensive. It's just cost recovery is nearly $300 per student monthly. It's a bit intense, and this is where the ad hoc committee wanted to put 3 options in front of the commission itself to say what we should do about this program. It is Early Childhood Literacy Program at James O. Jesse. There's a comparable program at Sunrise, but Sunrise program is much more heavily attended, which then cuts the cost because more people are coming into it. So, 3 recommendations. Anybody else want to do them? I feel like I'm talking a lot. The 3 recommendations would be to, and this was for everyone's input. These were just 3 options that we saw. And if you see a 3rd option or a 4th or 5th option, please let us know. But the 3 that we saw were to try and levelize that program to match the program at Sunrise. So it would definitely bring the cost to what they would pay at Sunrise, to be fair. But it would need better attendance to continue to make it work. So hoping by getting that cost down, it would bring in more people. still, at that rate, it's higher than what they've been paying in that center before, unless they qualify for income assistance through the citywide membership program. Second recommendation. Was that the replace? Sure.
Where would that subsidy come from, and how would you break down the degree of how much is subsidized?
We looked at, and this is still a draft kind of
No, I
approach to it.
understand.
The subsidy, basically, we're paying it already through the city funds.
Right.
This is the part of the Parks and Rec programs that are being paid for. The trying to do an even program, we'd get a little bit more income from certain programs, and we'd lose a little bit from other programs, but that would try and level itself out. The levels at how much the discount is applying to I found a chart that is what medical offices apply to income levels to try and find discounting for them. I thought it was a valid approach because, you know, that's where a lot of people do apply for income assistance is in the medical field. And this is programs that are assisting their children in the first place.
Right.
So again, it's all based off the federal poverty income level, how much of it, what the difference is, and they can be adjusted. We can create our own guidelines, but what we originally looked at was what are other people using as well to try and be fair. Did that answer? Okay. So unfortunately, an option for the ELC program, because of its cost, because of its low attendance, is also a removal of it. It's not something that necessarily wants to be done. This does serve kids. However, it doesn't serve a lot of kids, and its cost is very high. I hate to say it that way, but they could also go down to Sunrise, try and attend those. Vicki, is there still space in the Sunrise program?
We currently have 3 spots left.
Okay. So a few.
And we're serving 20 kids right now.
Correct, at James O. Jesse.
Yes. So, no, 15. So, 5 less. Yeah, sorry. Remind me, third option again? Oh, right, the ramp up. Ellen, go ahead.
Go ahead and say the third, and then I'll ask the question.
Okay. The third option was to slowly, over the next 5 years, try and ramp up the cost of this and hope that more people could be approached to attend or utilize the program. Obviously, if it continues to increase in price, people are going to know that's going to happen, which may deter them a bit. But to try and get some of the cost recovery so that, you know, certain city management positions are not angry about the price. So those are the 3 options that we had at the top of our minds. So any questions, Ellen?
Go ahead, Ellen.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. I'm curious, so early childhood literacy are, I mean, this is our pre-K, right? This is like first 5 program, right? So but is this a 0 to 5?
3.5 to 4.
Yeah, they're basically 3 years to 4 years and 9 months.
3 to
Because at
4.
4 years, 9 months, the state thinks that they should be in TK based on when their birthday falls.
And is this the program PSUSD is looking at producing or taking?
It is, but unfortunately, this was called now and wanting to present in March, and that is not being discussed until their board meeting next month. It would, if it went through, then it would replace the program, but I'm working off fact, not conjecture or rumor.
Well,
Isn't that only at
at Sunrise. The
Sunrise.
ELC program at Desert Highland was not, because they're still in negotiations, the school district's still in negotiation with the county to open up the Head Start building up at Desert Highland. The modular that they put in there in the late 90s, ran a program there. Due to funding, the program stopped. They went in and did the remodel on the building. The city worked with the contract with the county to have the facility upgraded to run the program, and now it's the school district and the county working out an MOU to operate the Head Start program out of that building, not out of the James O. Jesse building. So the program that was being looked at is at Sunrise, the Tiny Tot program, at least the space that the school district is looking at utilizing for Head Start program. We also looked at the Demuth Community Center. The coordinator, director, whatever Myra Casas' exact title is, felt that Sunrise was a better fit because they could come right in with the program right away without any modifications. Obviously, they would have less enrollee because with only one bathroom, they can only have 15 children. In order to go to their max, which was 24, they'd have to install another bathroom to a tune of about $50,000. So.
There's one bathroom in Highland Park.
At Highland, for the ELC program, they have, I think the back hallway has a couple. And because it's not licensed, we're not mandated by those types of ratios, whereas the school district is a licensed program and it's mandated.
Okay, so if PSUSD takes over the program at Sunrise, then we're still looking for what is our solution for 15 children?
And that would be a very good question to ask them if they ever sat down with us.
And you're really looking at even a larger number, because not only was it just 15 children at Desert Highland, it's the 27 children that are at Sunrise. If the school district takes that property over, that room over, those 27 children, maybe one might qualify for Head Start because it's below the federal poverty level. So you have 26 children that have nowhere to go.
They do have exceptions to that for people that make, sorry, I'm not talking into this. There are exceptions to how many students they can take at the regular level that they would provide, as well as people that make more than that.
It's 10%.
Which is not currently full, even though they have a waiting list. That's the reason they're looking into these spaces to begin with, is because they have a waiting list of 100 people, 100 students, and they don't have the space to do it.
Right.
Our ELC program, as I understand, most of these kids would qualify for that same program, and that's the same age group. So if we did eliminate that, they could join the Head Start that would be done there. But again, I don't know the details of what they're planning to do. It has not been presented. I hear a lot about it, but I can't make a recommendation ethically if it's just rumor.
So if we go forward with the ad hoc's recommendation, ideally in the next 4 or 6 months, something could shift.
And if so, it would actually save us money so that
Right.
this would apply and work better.
Right.
The goal was to create a base system that could, for the next few years, grow easily without running into the problems that we've had before by levelizing the field, but creating the systems
Yes.
that allow for those exceptions where people can't necessarily afford an after-school program, or the schedule doesn't work for them to go to like the ACES program, or they're on a waiting list for ACES programs. So this way, they can still have a city-funded program. They still are able to be taken care of pre or post-school, and hopefully affordable to everyone.
Question, Vicki, will Head Start actually end up at the James O. Jesse or the Highland community?
Not in the community center, but at the modular building.
Right.
Well, that's
That's the plan.
That's the plan. I mean, we worked for about 6 months on an agreement with the county to put in place. And after the city approved it, city council approved it, and it got put in place, then it was up to the school district and the county to work up an MOU of who was paying for what. And I'm not sure what the hangup is with them not having an MOU in place to start the program.
Okay, so I guess my question is then, does that remedy our situation with these huge costs by saying 6 months from now, there should be a program, and therefore, let's just ride this for 6 months, and then do something to push the program to get in place? I mean,
I don't know, because I don't know what the waiting list is for the existing program that was supposed to start. We had a meeting up there because the parents were getting a little antsy about why the program hadn't started. The building was done, the whole thing was waiting on the contract between the city and the county in place. And we probably had 10 or 15 parents at that meeting, trying to get answers, ready to start their kids. Comments were made that, if you really want to get in a program now, we can put you in at Catherine Finchie. But once you go into that program, you can't leave to go to the program at Desert Highland once it started. So I ran into several parents asking me, and this was the first I found out about 2 weeks ago that the program hadn't started, because I had a parent asking me, say, hey, I never got a phone call. Have they started the program at Desert Highland? And I said, sure they have. She goes, oh, no, we never got a phone call. And
So who do we need to talk to about that?
the district or county, since it's between the two of them.
The school district is currently meeting on this. As I said, it's going to be in their first meeting next month. It's actually on their agenda to,
Board meeting?
yeah, to address and deal with for the finalization of it, or not. All meetings can be interesting that way.
Is there some way that we can attend that meeting? Not all of us, but a representative from the commission attend that meeting?
We have one who does.
Okay.
Commissioner
Regularly.
Goodman,
And
I
are you
believe,
able to
attends.
speak on our behalf, or
Yes,
are you?
yes, I can speak. I will tell you, I've already met once with the superintendent, and I did a follow-up to see where the school district was at, and I have a meeting with her tomorrow. And if there is a very specific question, or 2 or 3 or 4 questions,
When are you opening the Head Start program up at Desert Highland Unity Center? What is the holdup?
What can we do to assist you?
How can we help
to
get
get there?
that started?
Because I'd love to get this line off of our budget, if that's going to be the resolution that will help the people of the neighborhood and not carry the weight here. I know that there are other things that are contingent there. i.e.
Right, and what you
staff
have
budget.
to understand is a lot of this cost is the staff cost associated with those programs. So if the program goes away, meaning we turn it to someone else.
staff cost doesn't.
Staff costs do not go away.
Okay, well, so there's 2 things. There's staff cost. Okay, so that's on the table. But we have families who aren't being served and kids who aren't being served. So that seems like that's going to bubble up to the surface, and we'll deal with those costs. So I have one question. When is the district opening the Head Start program at the Desert Highlands Center? Do you have, Trent, another question you would like me to address?
And
Yes.
not to, just to be a
Yes.
little more technical, it's not at the Desert Highland Community Center, it's at Desert Highland Park.
Park, thank you.
It's in the park, it's not at the center.
Thank you. No, it's very important. And the superintendent thought at that time, when I spoke with her last month, that PSUSD attorneys were actually looking at documentation. That's where she told me, I'm not saying it was stuck there, but that's where it was placed. So she knew that attorneys were looking at documents. What those documents were, I have no idea. So I will ask her that. Another question you would like me to present?
I'm wondering, can we call for someone to come and talk to us in a commission meeting about this relationship between the schools and our programs, just so that it's out on the table? Commissioner Pace.
President of the school board will probably be meeting with us after they have their next meeting. At our next meeting, he's going to be requested to come here to talk to us about the details of it.
So the school board meets twice a month in March. Do you know which meeting it's on the agenda for?
I understood it was the next one, but that was in quick conversation, and I'm
And I just want to interject too. I had
That'd be the 27th.
a conversation with Dr. Reddy the other day regarding our fee study and the situation with the school district of them taking over programs or not taking over programs. And he actually asked me to put on our next agenda basically a staff report with recommendations of what direction we should be going. Is this something the commission's in favor of giving our programs to the district to
Right.
take over, or do we as the city continue doing those and the city continues to subsidize them to whatever number we come up to? Because obviously today, we're probably not going to get to where we're ready to make a recommendation moving forward to city council. And it'll have to wait till our March meeting before we're there to do a final recommendation, and which means it may not get to council until the 1st of April.
Well, my hope was between today's meeting and getting at least sort of a nod from everybody that we're moving in the right direction, and our retreat, being able to pretty much get this resolved to the point that we make recommendations. But that, withstanding, we can come up with pricing, and if a program goes away, the pricing goes away. In essence, problem resolved.
Well,
That's not going to change
But the
that.
pricing actually, the cost doesn't really go away, because you're going to have to now move your humans asset around. And so if there are 3 salaried union workers, they're going to go somewhere. And so they might not be running early childhood. And whether there's a debate on who's better equipped, the cost of those 3 human assets doesn't go away.
But they may not be in our programs, and that's what we're worried about here, is our programs. So I'm not sure where your staff would go. I mean, in my corporate life, when somebody moved out of a division because of elimination of a job, the bank had to put them in something, but it might not be in my division or my cost center. So I'm not sure how that works here, but I'm not sure that we can not move forward with this project based on that concern. I mean, we don't have the answer to that. Commissioner Bowley.
Is the PSUSD willing to take on the costs of the people of the program and just leave it as it is, but pick up the tab for these individuals?
What would have to happen is the individuals that work for the city would have to go through classes and be certified and as early childhood education credentials, because it's a license, Head Start is a licensed program.
And that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Chances are no.
But you have to have your staff be certified and credentialed. And even though they've taken some classes in ECLA and whatnot, they don't have the credentials, city staff credentials, to be an accredited licensed program. So if you have a licensed program, you have to have the credential instructors, teachers to run the program.
So to
And
answer,
you're
if you
bound
take it
by-
over on Monday, they need to place credentialed individuals on Monday. And it could be a very long process for city staff to actually get to that credentialed place.
I think the other thing that we haven't really discussed, although it's really not our call, but an employee changing who their employer is not always a simple thing. Somebody who's been with the city for 20 years now becoming an employee of the public school system as a first-year employee, it may not be equitable, so.
And I think what Vicki was saying, but correct me if I'm wrong, is if you eliminate that program, the person that's running that program still works for the city and will still need to get paid, and it will still be in here. Is that correct? And if they move to another, okay, so what department would that person be qualified to be moved to if the district already has the other early childhood programs pumped into Tiny Tots or wherever? That's all I'm saying. I don't, unless you could
true.
put her on the ceiling and tell her to watch planes fly over.
Well, and I think that's an HR thing that Vicki
Right,
has to run.
and
That's
I
not
don't-
our call, absolutely.
But I'm just saying that.
It will be the importance of the program, because if you're still paying that person, and this is a senior level person, you're still gonna have to pay them to hand out basketballs.
Right.
So why not serve 15 children? Am I wrong?
Commissioner Goodman.
Or they're eliminated.
The positions aren't.
Right.
If you had, it'd be different if we said, we're not gonna do any recreation at all. Recreation is totally eliminated, then
Everybody's got.
that's okay. We can, the city can choose to get rid of it. If you choose to take a program and give it to the school district, or you give it to the YMCA, whoever you give it to, you've now taken a city program that city staff had, you gave to someone else, so you haven't eliminated it, you've just given it to someone else, so you still have those employees. The city kind of went through the same thing when they did at the airport. The employees at the airport did the landscape maintenance. When the city contracted out the landscape maintenance, they still had to find something for those employees to do at the airport. They had to take on other responsibilities over there.
Commissioner Pace.
So Travis might be able to help me out with this one, but there's an interesting term there, and that's giving the program to PSUSD to deal with. However, we're talking about, say, 5 programs. You're eliminating a program. If you eliminate a program, you can eliminate the staff legally.
If you eliminate the program totally and no one absorbs it.
Correct, because that is an early childhood literacy program. I'm going to use that as the example right now. And in a different building, even though it's proximal, a different program with a different name is starting up under PSUSD. Then yes, you eliminated the position, you can eliminate the person. And you can still get the kids served because these are the exact same target market that that program is trying to capture, is those 15 children that would be in that other program at the same age group, but now in a certified location with certified credentials with teachers trying to teach them.
Is as long as they have openings. They can only take so many children too on their site. So I don't know what their list is of how many they have already that are waiting to start because of some disagreement between the county and the school district.
Correct, but that's something that they would be dealing with then because we would no longer have this program. We no longer have this $180,000 a year charge. And at the same time, it provides a better level of service to these children than what we're providing.
I have a question.
Commissioner Goodman.
So far, all the work that your group has done is great. And I'm feeling really good about all the recommendations. And I'm head of household, and, you know, I would have to look at an increase and those types of things. But I like the resident, non-resident. I think you've done a lot of work. We did at the retreat ad hoc meeting yesterday give ample time for discussion on this. It feels like to me that if everything else was balancing out with the recommendations and the sliding scale and resident and non-resident, that to hold on to a part of the program that might be more expensive to service a community that is all too familiar with losing programs and not qualifying, that it might actually work itself out. And I don't know, because I haven't seen the numbers run, but if we can work it out over here, there might be enough resources to float something that is more expensive than we would be happy with as a city, but be able to accommodate and maybe revisit it. So I'm just throwing that out as an idea, and I think it's worthy of some thought and discussion.
I definitely think we can work on that at the retreat. I also wonder about, you know, if we look at ways to more highly populate it, or if that really is a declining population, are these children going to age out, not be replaced, and therefore the program is going to be on decline, and does Head Start come in after that? So there are some things that I don't think this group can answer that we're going to need to have brought forth on our behalf. So, Commissioner Pace, I think you might have had something, or?
Yeah, so as we're getting down to the wire on timing here, since there were a couple of things in here along with price increases to other programs like at the pool and such after the remodel, and then actually charging for like a drop-in pickle rate at Desert Highland like they charge over at Demuth so that people can play inside. I think it would be best, now that kind of everyone has the idea of what this is, to take it home, take a look at the pricing structure, if you can read it, grab a magnifying glass, and see, you know, if there's anything glaring that stands out. These blocks that are kind of colored, that I highlighted into, these are ones where there were some oddities to them, such as the program never had a charge to begin with. But it is a good program. There are a lot of people that attend, and we could do that. That's like the after-school study program at the community center. The Highland has never really had they've had this kind of flat rate membership thing, but with the citywide program, fitting that into it would definitely be a change to what they're used to. But again, it gives them more access across the board to everything across the city. So that's a big block in here as well. And then, like I said, pickleball is one of those because it always gets brought up at every meeting. Having a drop-in rate there does help to bring in some of the costs, and they are used to it because the Demuth Community Center does it. And so if we did it up there as well, it would help to alleviate some of the stress. But really think about the citywide membership program. One of the things we had regular debates about was, what is a resident? How are you a resident of this city? You know, do you live here 8 months out of the year? Do you have a lease here? Are you a full-time hourly employee here? You know, we need, if we're going to move forward on that program, if that's something that this commission approves of, we need to kind of have some of those ideas in place for the way the city would implement them. So they're all things to think about. As well as given the information about, you know, what the populations are near our community centers. I'm not just talking about James or Jesse, but definitely Demuth as well. You know, that's a stressed community as well. It hasn't historically been, but it's starting to be now. How do we accommodate two very different ends of the city and yet still serve as many of them as we can?
One other piece that I'm planning to go to the Cathedral City Parks and Recs meeting that's later this month, just to talk about the fact that we are going to be charging more to non-residents, and I am going to challenge them to look at the fact that they've eliminated their programs, so their children come and use our programs, and I want them to think and talk to their council about how they might be able to step in and help us with the delta, because I think it will be difficult on some of their family members, but we are the commission for Palm Springs, so we have to be focused on the people of Palm Springs. We can't not do a non-resident increase and you know, meet the goals of the council. So something to be thinking about. Yes.
And so Cathedral City is actually looking at a sugar tax, and that the income from that sugar tax would actually go to their Parks and Recs, because I believe their Parks and Recs really doesn't have a budget, but they're looking at what would that really look like, and sugar, and it's not uncommon. Other cities have done this, and I thought it was really interesting to like look at that and think about it, and then so I'd be curious to know what your findings are when you come back.
I've never heard of sugar tax. I like that concept because Commissioner Armstrong.
All right. Well, first I want to thank Commissioner Pace, because he is like has his head for numbers, and he's done so much work on this, and so he's has done a great job on it. You know, but I would just want to step back and talk, you know, how this started, so the community knows. I mean, we went as a community and voted to tax ourselves more, but some of this started before we decided to tax ourselves more. And, you know, I'm not sure where we're at exactly, because we did tax ourselves more and we have more money in the city, if you want to phrase it that way, than we had before the tax. So, you know, but we did have an edict, it seemed to be from the top, that we need to look at these fees. And, you know, I was sort of reluctant on this subcommittee because I don't really want to raise fees on anybody, but I hope we could do it in a good way if we have to, at least for part of the process. But I don't think anybody really wants to raise fees or eliminate any of these programs. But I think, you know, as Commissioner Pace has talked about, I mean, we had to look at the structure and fairness, and also if there are exceptions to justify that. So I would like everyone, if they could, to, when we talk about it next time, think about, you know, the structure we've created, and, you know, the fairness, and if we're going to do exceptions, you know, why we want to do exceptions, because there's good arguments for why you could make exceptions, I think. And I did, lastly, just want to make the point, I was looking at the master plan, and there is language in there, which I did not remember until we started this process, talking about, when we look at our fees, that the goal is to recover full recovery when possible. So that's just, but, you know, that has a caveat on there too. Doesn't mean we'll always have to charge our fees. And, you know, the idea that, you know, should our programs be revenue neutral, or, you know, should they be subsidized, is a kind of bigger policy question that we should talk about. I kind of think I probably know what most people here would think, but, you know, I think that's been a little bit lost in some of the discussions higher above us. So those are some things I thought were worth mentioning before our next meeting.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Diaz.
I just had a question. I thought maybe Commissioner Pace, when you started talking, I thought you said something, but then we talked about a lot of things, so I'm just gonna come back to it. The, all the memberships or annual fees, I thought you said maybe it would be one thought was one payment for a city to use all the city programs just for one fee, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so, and when I'm looking at these base rates for everything, that's for each individual program you'd have to pay, or you would just pay one? Can you just fill me in?
Currently, if, to use any of the programs at Demuth Community Center, you have to have an annual membership plus then whatever your fees are for your program. At Sunrise Center, if you're using the child
Right.
code programs there, you pay an annual fee to register.
And I've done all of that. I'm just wondering, is that now gonna change? So when I pay for something at the leisure center, that allows me to just have to pay for the program rather than you're gonna charge me another $50 to walk in this building plus the 25 for the program?
The concept of this was, this is the annual fee for the city-wide. Sunrise Center, Pavilion, Demuth, Highland, you can use any facility because you now have a citywide membership.
And what's?
But
and
then you pay for
yeah,
the individual
programming.
programs.
And so what is that city, did we have a citywide, what was the fee for that?
So the citywide program, if you actually use the very top 3 lines, you have a family membership was
Okay.
anything 3+, you would have $100 for a resident.
So where it says Demuth, is that what I'm on?
Yes, so
Okay.
unfortunately,
That-
my layout had an
That's
issue here.
cool, as long as you, I just needed you to explain that to me, I totally get it.
Yeah, I
I'm
wanted to
good.
mention what each of the membership types was at all
That's
the
fine.
different locations and to show what
So
it
if
would
I
be.
pay $100 for my family and myself, that
Uh-huh.
would cover me, then I would just pay to go into this thing, to do
Yeah, if
gymnastics
you're
class, to
doing-
take yoga, whatever. Got you,
Exactly.
Got you, thank you.
You're welcome.
And while we didn't include it at this point, and we think it's too early to include full-time, my belief is that people who want to use the parks, people who walk their dogs on the parks, really ought to have a card that they've paid for to have access to the parks and use the parks across the board. And if they also want to swim, then they've already got the card, they just need to pay for that service. And that's where there could be actually some extra income to the city, and an opportunity when you have people who are blocking usage. I mean, I look at the tennis courts, and I see a group of people there that are blocked in for free, and we're not getting any opportunity here, so. But we need to get base one in first. Commissioner Pace.
And that's more what this is. You know, whatever we decide to do with this later, I see it as a program that can grow easily, and you could use it for other uses. This is its application as it stands for how the city currently stands. You know, even, which we didn't get to, even fees for if you're renting facilities, there's basis on resident, non-resident. They've already got their resident card, that's how they prove their residency. So it makes it simpler, so they're using one thing everywhere. Quick note, before anybody goes off to anything else, please take a look at the pool. It's down after all the highlighting, it's the first section where it gets very small. There's daily adult, daily youth, and then the punch passes of 25 at the swim center. There are slight increases in there. Think about them. I highly suggest you talk to friends, neighbors, and family, because I've already gotten approached 6 times at the gym. Because they love the new pool, but they also know we're going through the fee study right now of to what we should charge people. So I've had a lot of comments. Take a look, see if it works for y'all, and then I guess during the retreat, we're going to delve into this further?
Yes. Yes, and we did, it's almost 4 o'clock. We're very close to the back end of the meeting, but Vicki, did you want to go over the fees at a high level and talk about them? I think some of us were a little surprised in the quick review that they weren't flatter across the board, and wondered if maybe you could address that.
Clear for me what you mean by flatter.
Well, I thought we were hoping, go ahead.
So one of the parts that we had originally done before this was kind of pulled off of our plate was we actually went in and measured the different locations that were there, whether it be a 1,200 square foot section that people were renting or a 600 square foot section. And yet reading this by location, not by the actual facility that they're renting, but what neighborhood it's located in, this doesn't that doesn't account for that. If you're renting 1,000 square foot in Highland opposed to 1,000 in Sunrise or 1,000 in Demuth, Demuth's going to be expensive, Sunrise is going to be somewhat affordable. Oh, and let's go and decrease the price at Highland. That's what this says.
Well, what I was instructed to do was take each facility to base it off what the annual budget was that we spent in end of 2017, divided it by the number of hours we actually operate this facility, come up with an hourly rate per facility. So that was the direction I was given, not to base it off of square footage, but to base it off how many hours it's open, how much money that facility costs us to run. And if we were to want to charge full recovery costs for everything, we would charge that amount of money, the $412.
Was that from finance or was that from somebody in particular? Because
That was what direction I got from Marcus Fuller, Assistant City Manager.
so I think where we were going by measuring facilities is we would drop
But-
cost into a bucket divided equally amongst the locations and square footage. Now, there would
Well-
still be an opportunity for discounting based on economic resources. So if you had an individual who was falling into the category that is extremely low, they'd rent that space at the lower price. But
And you could still do that. And let me give you, for instance, for the first page is the leisure center. So I based off the pavilion is 10,000 square feet. The dance studio is only 2,000. So I took, 2,000 compared to 10,000. I took that 20% times the 412 to come up with what the rate should be for the leisure center. The pavilion was based off the higher rate. The community room is about a little over 1,000 square feet, so I based off 1,000, so it was 10% of the $412. So I tried to base the different rooms, and that's why what I gave you today was, after talking with Mr. Crawford, the community center manager, James O'Jesse, we wanted to break down all the rooms that they rent out there, not just, because if you go right now, I can rent any room out there for $49 if I'm a resident for all day. There's no distinction of, whether it's 3 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours. It's
Size,
$49 for the day,
capability,
no matter what size the room is. So we broke it down. The gymnasium was set fees. We had his AV room, which is the new room remodeled. Back off of that, in the older part of the building is what he calls their conference room, which is about 1,000 square feet. I think the one meeting room was 500 square feet, and then what we call the mirror room off the gym is about 400 square feet. So I took that, the gym's 9,000, so I took what we had based on the 9,000 and came with a percentage of what the fee would be. So.
Okay, I guess we can, based on the Brown Act, I'm trying to figure out how we behave around this item, but maybe we go back to Marcus and have the conversation with him, because I really did want to try to level things out based on base fee and size, and then have the economic impact bring down any cost for a person who is local, but sort of keep things equal, because it still feels a little bit like I'd be crazy not to go rent, the Highland Center, which is air-conditioned and large and comfortable, rather than using the Demuth. So maybe we do that as a sideline and then be prepared for the discussion for our retreat. I, too, want to thank Commissioner Pace and Armstrong and Vicki for all the work that has gone into doing this. It was not easy, and your drive, Commissioner Pace, and adherence to the numbers, it really, really helps, because you took all of the emotion out and you just drove numbers and let's figure it out and get it right. So I really want to thank you and Commissioner Armstrong for reviewing everything with us and going over it. So, and Vicki the same. We'll go to the retreat then. Like to do a quick round robin with each of the commissioners as to any updates or comments. So, Commissioner Boley.
Nothing more.
Commissioner Pace.
It's more of a quick clarifying question. Are we going to have agenda would be the wrong word, but kind of a list of things, topics that we will be going over at the retreat?
There will be an agenda. We have to post it, so there will be
Oh,
an
there is an
agenda.
agenda.
And we
Okay.
can only discuss what will be on that agenda.
Gotcha. I didn't realize it was that formal.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
and
has to be.
It's a Brown Act, so people can attend from outside if need be. So, Commissioner Armstrong? Commissioner Goodman?
Yes, two things. One, thank you guys very much for all the work that you did that went into this. It's very hardy, so I wanted to say that. I just had a question about the retreat, Trent, something that you brought up. So we are building the agenda and topics, and there is a section for ad hoc kind of breakout and then coming back together. It's a total of, with discussion and commentary and thought, about an hour and a half or 2 hours. And I just want to make sure that, and this is okay if this dominates that conversation, but that's enough time. And so, Vicki, we have the agenda put together. I'll send it to you. And maybe the solution would be to circulate it out to everyone. You can make some comments and so forth, and we'll point out where this conversation, the program fee conversation, would fit in. How's that sound?
Yep.
Would that be good? Okay. And then I just wanted to share around the sugar tax. I know it's kind of insane. It sounds kind of insane, but 4 cities in California have passed a sugar tax, and it's on sugary drinks and sugary items, and its intention is that money would go to health and well-being and deal with the obesity issue. So it's not off the charts. I mean, it's not a crazy thing. And I think if Cathedral City is seriously looking at it, and I know they've put a group of people together, they're having regular meetings, and they might lead in the valley that they put this tax forward, and I think other cities will follow. So I just put it out there as something to pay attention to, because it really could shift our experiences at Parks and Rec and programming, and some of our centers and some of the things that you're running. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Diaz?
Exact time and location for retreat?
9 a.m. Saturday.
8:30.
I'm sorry.
We're starting with
8:30.
coffee at 8:30. 9 a.m. we'll start sharp. And I will send Vicki the address. It is at the at PSUSD's Service Center. That's Service Center Drive. And that is Gene Autry between Ramon and Vistacino, and it's the closest is the Ramon side. So it's Ramon and Gene Autry across from the airport. And Vicki will send out the exact address. So 8:30, and we will have the meeting room, and it'll be in the service building.
Thank you.
And are they handling catering, or am I?
We'll handle all of the food, and you and I can talk about what to
Okay.
do, but we'll make sure we take care of that.
Commissioner Davis?
I just had a quick question. How far in advance will we expect to receive the agendas? Do you know? How far in advance?
I can get it to Vicki by Friday. It's already mapped out. It's just a matter of putting it in a format, and then
Okay.
Vicki, you get it out to everybody Monday. Would that work?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
And have you had a chance to talk to city staff at Mejia? Because he'll be invited to present? Or you haven't had a chance to look at the
I haven't
agenda?
talked with
Okay.
Anthony yet, no.
Because I think there's going to
City
be a
clerk.
couple people that we're going to need to talk to make sure that they're able, we just covered 2 during today's meeting, but we are going to need some special guests to share some information around the Brown Act and things like that. So thank you very much, everyone. We will, actually, this calls for adjournment until the March 20th meeting, but it will actually,
The retreat is basically a special meeting, so we're not, I mean, I guess we could adjourn to that meeting, but
we'll go with the March 20th. We will adjourn to
right,
our next meeting,
clarification.
which is Tuesday, March 20th at 2:30. We will have the special retreat meeting in between. Thank you.
Thank you, good job.